When we make a decision that requires us to do some complex calculations or reasoning, our brains often use a mental shortcut or heuristic to simplify the process. This mental shortcut is attribute substitution, also referred to as substitution bias. Instead of answering the original difficult question, we unknowingly answer a related but simpler question. This mental shortcut is closely related to the availability bias, which means we tend to rely on readily available information, usually based on our own experiences or beliefs, to make decisions. From a neuroscience perspective, attribute substitution happens when our brain tries to make things easier by swapping one piece of information for another in order to minimize cognitive load. Complex decisions often requires the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive function center. However, this process requires a significant amount of energy. To conserve energy, our brain opts for mental shortcuts or heuristics, recruiting the less energy-intensive emotional system to quickly pull up emotionally charged or readily available information. Here's an example. Original question: what is your opinion on any complicated topic? Substitution: what is the opinion of experts and authorities whom I trust? If you are not an expert on the specific topic, you're likely to lack the detailed knowledge needed to form a well-rounded opinion. As a result, your brain tends to rely on substitution bias, which means it leans towards the viewpoints of your trusted experts and authorities. However, this mental shortcut has its drawbacks. Trusting an authority or expert without due diligence can lead to misleading or incorrect decisions. Here's another example. Original question: what do you think about the proposed policy in our department? Substitution: how will the proposed policy affect me? Will it create more work for me? Will I be compensated for the extra work? When a new policy is proposed in a work setting, the complexity of understanding its implications could be overwhelming. Substitution bias kicks in, focusing our attention on immediate concerns like workload or compensation. While these are important factors to you, they may be only subsets of the overall implications of the policy. Here is another example. Original question: are we heading in the right direction as an organization? Substitution: did we have a gain in the organizational performance outcome last year? In this example, the original question demands a comprehensive evaluation involving multiple metrics: stakeholder feedback, employee performance, job satisfaction, and perhaps even industry trends. This is a resource-intensive task for the brain's prefrontal cortex. The substitute question allows the brain to lean on the hippocampus, which is excellent at recalling facts such as last year's performance metrics, thereby saving mental energy. One more example. Original question: do we have the right data to make a wise decision? Substitution: what data and information can I remember? The original question requires an evaluation of the adequacy and the validity of available data. The substitute question simplifies the question by relying on what you can readily remember. Another example is about evaluating new hires. Original question: is the newly hired employee doing well? Substitution: how do I feel about the new hire right now? Do I like this new employee? The original question requires a performance review, which includes gathering feedback, analyzing measurable outcomes, and engaging in other cognitive-intensive activities. The substitute question is a handy tool that helps us quickly gauge our emotions. It works through the amygdala, the part of our brain responsible for emotional responses. In this case, emotions can be misleading. Your emotions are not always reflective of an employee's performance or potential. It is better to rely on a mix of qualitative and quantitative assessments for a more accurate evaluation. Stereotypes and emotional cues like disgust or moral outrage are also examples of how substitution bias operates in our daily decisions. Our brains are wired for efficiency, and when faced with the complicated task of judging a stranger's personality, we may opt for the simpler route, using stereotypes. Imagine meeting someone from a different racial background. Your brain may involuntarily substitute the complex task of assessing their character with easier stereotype-based evaluation. This happens so subtly that you may think you've made an unbiased judgment, not realizing the extent to which stereotypes have clouded your perception. But it doesn't stop there. Our emotional responses often serve as stand-ins for more nuanced thinking, especially when it comes to moral decisions. Ever felt a surge of disgust when confronting morally questionable behavior, like betrayal from a close friend? That's your brain using disgust as a mental shortcut to judge the situation. Similarly, the feeling of moral outrage comes into play when we work with freeloaders in a group setting. Picture a team member who never contributes to a group project but enjoys all the accolades and even gets promoted. It's not just an emotional reaction of anger, it's your internal moral compass signaling that something is amiss. This dynamic reminds me of a saying, "I'm a team player, just don't play me." Have you ever noticed how politicians artfully dodge complex policy questions by weaving in emotionally charged stories? That's the substitution bias at work, and it's a tactic as savvy as it is misleading. Instead of addressing the nitty-gritty details of their policy proposals, some politicians switch gears and answer a different question altogether, one that's easier to handle and laden with emotional impact. It's a twofold win for them. They sidestep a challenging topic while also forging an emotional connection with the audience. But wait, can you even remember what the original question was? Exactly. Job applicants are no strangers to this technique either. Picture yourself conducting an interview and asking a candidate a challenging question. Instead of a straightforward answer, the applicant deftly sidesteps, responding to a related but fundamentally different question. They may even use language similar to your original question, and if you are not paying close attention, you may not even catch the skillful substitution. Why do applicants do this? Sometimes it's because the applicants don't feel comfortable with sharing the true answer, and at other times, it's because they simply don't know the answer. Both scenarios underlie the power and the subtlety of the substitution bias. Whether it's a politician pulling at your heartstrings or a job applicant dancing around a tricky question, the substitution bias can distort our perception and decision-making processes. Being aware of it is the first step toward a more informed and discerning approach to understanding the world around us. Leaders can also take advantage of the substitution bias. For example, before introducing a new proposal, you can anticipate what substitution questions or emotional responses your team members may have. You can also preemptively instill positive emotional states in your teams. Research has shown that positive emotional states can open up cognitive resources and improve problem solving, thereby making the team more receptive to new ideas. While it's beneficial for leaders To engage your team emotionally, it's important that this does not turn into manipulative behavior. Ethical leadership requires that the emotional engagement be authentic and align with objective merits of the proposal at hand. Here are 4 strategies you can use to overcome substitution bias. First, slow down. Before making judgments based on stereotypes or emotional cues, take a moment to pause. Give your prefrontal cortex the time it needs to fully analyze a situation. Second, critical thinking. Challenge the assumptions behind the substitute questions you find yourself asking. Compare them against the original question and ask yourself, does it truly cover the essence of what you need to know? Third, consult diverse viewpoints. To avoid falling into the trap of substitution bias, consult a range of opinions and data sources. Ensure that your decision-making is not unduly influenced by biases, whether they are stereotypes or affective heuristic. Fourth, use systematic evaluation. Use objective criteria to evaluate situations, especially those involving moral or ethical dimensions. Start observing your decision-making process and those of others around you. See if you can spot instances of substitution bias. Please feel free to share your comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.